You are live. Okay. Well, an error occurred, but I think we're all good now. Welcome, everyone. This is a special LinkedIn Live that I'm doing. Also, if you're listening to it on my podcast, welcome to my Nonprofit Nation listeners. Happy to have you with me. And today's topic is something that I personally love to discuss and talk about. It's going to be nonprofit social media trends for the new year. So, frequently asked questions from both my podcast listeners, my LinkedIn followers, my students, my clients. What is it going to take to actually have social media success in 2024? What kinds of posts are likely to inspire? Which channels get the most engagement? How are nonprofits handling the rise of AI? Which social platforms are they most and least confident will deliver positive return on investment in the new year? So in this episode, I'm joined by the fabulous Hootsuite social impact team. I'll introduce them to discuss their nonprofit social trends 2024 report. And we're going to go into key insights and trends, how to strategically allocate our time, how to leverage entertainment, return on investment, measurement, analysis, going forward, all of that kind of great stuff. So I would like to welcome Ava Taylor, the Director of Social Impact at Hootsuite. And Ava has over 15 years of experience creating and executing strategic programs and campaigns that connect brands and nonprofits with their customers, communities, and other key stakeholders. And I'm also welcoming Laura Zubick, the Social Impact Manager. And Laura is a marketing, corporate social responsibility, and DEI professional who's passionate about bringing stakeholders forward in a purpose-driven way. So Ava and Laura, welcome. Welcome to both the podcast and welcome to LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to dive in. So I want to hear from both of you. Maybe Ava, you could start. How did you both get into, or how did you get into social impact work?
I think I've, over the course, it's kind of been a part of my life as long as I remember to do things like volunteering and fundraising. So I always found ways to integrate it into my early career before I think I really knew what CSR or corporate social responsibility was. And so whether that was like, I would be running the employee volunteering events or finding nonprofits to bring into campaigns and things like really early on, collaborations wherever possible. So yeah, it's been a really nice blend of CSR and kind of digital marketing and strategy work. And now I get to work full time with nonprofits on their social strategies.
Oh, great. Thanks. And Laura, how about you?
Yeah, my first exposure into kind of this formal social impact world was back in university. I was a business student and I did one of my internships in CSR. It was kind of more well known at that point. And I just remember thinking, like, I can't really believe this is a job. This is so cool that I get to blend like the business world, but also bring purpose into what people are doing in their work. And that's what I really found lit me up. And I worked in marketing for quite a few years in the beginning of my career, but kept finding my way back to those either cause-based campaigns or opportunities where we could do community partnerships with nonprofits. So I worked my way back into finding a formal social impact career. And now I get to work to help our employees find purpose in what they do and work with our nonprofit partners, which is really amazing.
Yes, wonderful. So I invited you on today to talk about the new Hootsuite report. I will put the link in the show notes and also on the LinkedIn comments. We're here to talk about this report, the Nonprofit Social Trends 2024. So I think maybe, Ava, I'll throw this to you. Why should nonprofits shift their focus in 2024?
I think it's an interesting time for nonprofits and social media in general. We've seen a lot of shifts in the landscape and a lot of competing priorities and global trends affecting nonprofits too. So it's becoming more critical than ever that they're able to really focus their efforts into what is actually most meaningful for them. So depending on what their goals are for using social media, that ultimately should drive the strategy and which platforms you use. So throughout the three trends, you'll kind of see how do we define, what does a good return on investment look like for a nonprofit, and then what tactics are going to help you get there? And then how do you focus your time on which platforms make the most sense? You don't have to spread yourself too thin. And then ultimately, are there tools out there like AI that can help you save time and find ways to do things faster, better, collaborate more with others, that kind of thing. So it's, I think it's a really important time for focus, because we just don't have the luxury of time and resources, whether for profit or nonprofit these days. So it's, from a return on investment ROI perspective, I think we're seeing that nonprofits are getting a bit frustrated. They're not seeing the returns they're hoping for, or things are changing that are out of their control. So if they're getting frustrated, we wouldn't blame them. So hopefully, how to navigate the constant flux of new features, responsibilities, information available. Our research is revealing that a lot of nonprofits are approaching social in the way that will help them really maximize what they're going to get from it. And so we're trying to point them towards grounding their efforts in meaningful relationships and relationship building and interactions that will drive long-term relationships, repeat donors, advocates for your cause. So that's kind of at a whole what the report is going to talk about.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fantastic. And my next question, Laura, maybe you could take this, and feel free to, kind of go back and forth. But the report mentions the challenge that I see personally, but also that I do see with clients, students, people that I'm working with, the challenge of just navigating through the constant influx of new tools, features, and algorithm updates. And in fact, before we hit the live button, we were just talking about the changes to Facebook's fundraising tools, where now they're charging fees. So how do social marketers, how can we effectively filter out the noise and stay focused on strategies that yield meaningful results?
Yeah, it's a really important question. We know that from our survey that we did, over 70% of social media marketers are feeling like there is too much to do. It's hard to keep up with the pace of change on the platforms, new platforms launching. So like Ava said, it is more important than ever to stay focused and realize what works for your organization. And a lot of that is grounded first in making sure your social team is really clear on what objectives for the organization are you really trying to drive through your social strategy. So is it increasing donations? Is it finding new volunteers? Is it diversifying your donor base or growing community and connection? It could be so many different things, but being very clear on what those objectives are, and then conducting ROI audits to really see what's working well and what's not, and then staying laser focused on the things that are bringing results for your organization. And I think something that we see, not just with nonprofit organizations, but with for-profit as well, is that when folks run the ROI audits, they'll say, okay, well, everything across my many, many platforms is positive, but what we really need to do is look at your results in comparison to one another, because while everything might be positive, if one thing you're doing is performing exponentially better, that's really what you want to focus in on. And don't be afraid to kind of maybe drop off. We'll talk about this later, but drop off some of the platforms that aren't delivering those results, or really lean into the content that your audience is reacting to. So you'll hear this, I think, time and time again from us today and in the report, but just being laser focused on what the data is showing is performing well for your organization's specific objectives.
Yeah. And I think, on that point of being really clear on the goals, so prior to this current role, I used to lead the social team at Hootsuite. And what was really critical from a prioritization perspective is aligning with your leadership team on those priorities. And that will help you also make those conversations about, this is why we shouldn't be on a platform. I think what we saw with the survey data is, people are struggling with, how do we even get off a platform? How do we get leadership buy-in for those decisions? If they think we should be on TikTok, but we're not seeing a return, aligning with your leadership team on, what we need to do most is raise awareness for this campaign, or we need to get signatures here, or we want to build our email list. That's really going to help you say, well, in that case, this is what's going to help us get there fastest. And that's where we should focus most of our efforts. So being clear on those goals and then aligning on those goals with leadership is going to help you bring a lot of weight into the conversations and have a lot more power to change things.
That's fantastic. And what I would say to the audience, this is your chance to ask us questions. You have 3 people that live and breathe and work in the social media and social impact space. So you should take this time to ask us whatever questions that you want. So let's get to the question of social ROI, return on investment, because the report does emphasize, and it'll be a theme for today, that return on investment is going to take center stage on social media. And that is probably one of the most challenging things for nonprofits to really figure out, because they might not have a plan. They might not have goals. They might not have these tactics in place where they can measure. They might not be doing measurement and analysis on a consistent basis. So what strategies or tactics are you seeing that smart nonprofits are adopting to enhance their social media performance?
You know, it's interesting. This is actually a topic I've talked about a lot over the years. And it comes back to kind of a pattern of goals and tracking and things. But it's, I mean, Laura, you're so hands-on in the data. What do you want to add here first?
I can kind of set the context a little bit for what direction we're hearing nonprofits should go to understand what ROI can come from your social in the first place. So what we learned is that consumers are coming to social media for entertainment. You know, after actually using it for socialization with their friends and family, the number one reason they're telling us is, I want to be entertained. And entertainment can mean a lot of different things, and we can get into that. I don't want to scare you off by thinking entertainment means you need to be funny or lighthearted. You know, it can mean I'm learning something, or I'm feeling hopeful, or I'm connecting with folks. But what we learned is that nonprofits are not necessarily giving consumers that through their social strategies. We're seeing that a lot of product or brand updates or news is the majority of what nonprofits are sharing on, multiple times a week or even a daily basis. But then there's a little bit of a disconnect when nonprofits go to measure the ROI of their social strategies right now. 80% of nonprofits are using engagement as their top metric. But I don't think it's surprising that if you think about that critically, if you're measuring engagement, but you're not actually giving your audience content they want to engage with, your ROI is going to be a little bit disappointing if that's kind of how you're showing leadership, how you're doing. So there's a bit of a disconnect that we're seeing from the data. And then Ava, I don't know if you want to comment there on how you might want to actually link those two things together and measure, but we've got a lot of suggestions in the report as well about kind of the tactics to get into changing that strategy.
Yeah, and this isn't even it's not even just a nonprofit specific issue, but when it comes to just measuring what, I think what part of the trouble is too, that, we don't cover in depth in the report itself, but there's a wealth of data available to you, especially on the engagement side. So it's really natural for any social media marketer to want to go to what's easily available. And if you can put kind of that effort in to connect your measurements and your KPIs to the goals that you're trying to measure through things like UTMs. We use a lot of tracking links on our side. I can't stress enough how important it is to understand this particular platform and this particular post drove this newsletter sign up, or this donation, or this visit to this campaign page. That is a game-changing component of a social strategy for any organization. And we do have a lot of resources we can share on how to do that. But it's something that absolutely changed the game for my social teams and the nonprofits that we've worked with. And that's how you can actually say, this platform and this campaign drove a real return on investment. This content was engaging, it educated people, it gave them hope, it connected them to the cause, it showed transparency and impact on what we were doing as a nonprofit. And we saw a multitude of results. And of those results, we care a lot about people who are joining our newsletter, for example, so that we can reach them throughout the year outside of social media. If there is an algorithm change and there's an urgent appeal, we know we can reach out to them at any point, and they've shown a real interest. So that kind of pathway of thinking about it feels like it might be a lot of work up front. It's not that much work to get it in place, but obviously with competing priorities and lack of time and maybe small teams, it is something that will actually save you a tremendous amount of time down the road. And so investing in that now is what's going to help you actually be tremendously successful in 2024.
Yes. Oh, Perfect. Absolutely. I want to take a break from my questions and ask a couple of questions from the audience. So Jennifer says, how often should we post leading up to end of the year, as most gifts come in the last week of the year? What do you think?
It's a good question. I think consistency around posting is something that we hear a lot. And obviously year end is tremendously important for nonprofits. And one of the partners that we've been working with really closely this year that's, I think, quite relevant to this is Giving Tuesday. So we've kind of been working hand in hand with that organization. And, you know, a big part of driving successful year end campaigns is actually a lot of the work in the lead up to the year end. So, you know, it is a really competitive time right now. So, you know, posting consistently and giving quality and then showing impact year round is actually going to help boost your year end campaign as well. So you can actually alleviate some of the heavy posting now by doing it earlier in the year and tapping into those kind of key moments throughout the year, those kind of national dates and things too. But just to kind of address this question right now, as I know nonprofits are looking for you know, as much donations as they possibly can, it would be, you know, probably worthwhile to actually not go too heavy on the posting. I think what you don't want to do is drive people away with too many fundraising asks all at once so that they decide to unfollow you and you can't reach them in the new year with other content and other updates. So maintaining a balance is really important here. And I know, Laura, you've probably got some data to kind of speak to this as well. But you don't want to make it just about fundraising asks. It's quite important. And it will be more effective if you can balance it with those updates. So if you can kind of get what we heard from some of the nonprofits we've spoken to is kind of a balance of, you know, maybe 20/80, like trying to keep those fundraising asks actually to a fairly minimum level and balancing it with stories of impact and visibility into who's running the organization so people trust the nonprofit. Do you want to add to that, Laura?
I just think you've hit on such an important point with the buildup throughout the entire year. I think a bit of a trap that we see organizations fall into is that they think of social media as their fundraising engine. And there is, like you said, there is mass potential for fundraising on social media, but it can't be the only pillar of your social strategy. It should just be one pillar of your social strategy. And really organizations like we've kind of hinted at with that entertainment piece and the engagement metric is, like you said, the relationships need to be built all year. And when you build those really strong relationships, then you have this owned audience of already invested and loyal supporters that you can hit with more direct targeted asks, maybe by having accumulated them, like Eva said, with measurement to build your email list. And that's the way you're reaching them instead of just kind of hitting them over the head with fundraising asks on social media. So yeah, I just think I just want to really reemphasize that point of year-round relationship building and not overdoing it on the fundraising asks.
Yes, it's all about what you do throughout the year. It's all about consistency and, like you said, good storytelling, sharing your impact. And what we don't want is we don't want donors to think that they are transactions on a bank statement.
Exactly.
We want it to be more relational, and we want it to be, they feel that they're part of something meaningful and a bigger cause. They're part of something bigger than themselves, something that reflects their values and ethics, and that they're not just sort of like an ATM. So that's you know, what we want to cultivate. All right, so let's do one more question, then I'll go back to my questions. We do have a lot of coming in, but you know, Hootsuite scheduling and management platform. Is there a best practice in terms of scheduling the right amount of social media posts?
Yeah, and you know, this is kind of going to touch a little bit on kind of the AI kind of data-driven features, and I can see there's even other questions about, you know, one-person communications team. Nathan, I feel your pain. I've been there, and it's important, I think, to leverage tools where you can to save time. So one of the things that, and this discussion really isn't about Hootsuite specifically, but you know, for the nonprofits that we get to work with, we can see that there are tools that will save them time. So in terms of best practice, like, it's kind of amazing. We like in our, like what we do on our side, for example, because we obviously use our own tool, is we can be like, oh, cool, I'm going to schedule at the best recommended time. And so you start to see that if you want to kind of save yourself time as like a bit of a one-person team, best practice, like if you can leverage a tool that will give you data about like when is your audience most likely to be online and engage, that's a huge help because you don't need to track all that data yourself to figure it out. But best practice in terms of scheduling is being consistent. Ultimately, I'd say you probably would want to do at least kind of every other day at a minimum to keep top of mind. But obviously, depending on the size of your team, creating that content can be a little bit challenging. So thinking about ways that you can take a story and breaking it out into multiple pieces can help with that content challenge as well. And then you can kind of schedule a regular rhythm around when your audience is typically online. And I think ultimately understanding who your audience is that you're trying to reach, what platforms they use, when are they typically online, that will help you kind of gauge, oh, okay, they're kind of online most mornings or most evenings when they're out of work. Off work, sorry, not out of work. And therefore, we're going to target our content to them in those moments. And to Laura's point about entertaining content, whether that's more like giving them inspiration and hope or educating them, you can really, I think, lean into that type of data to help maximize the posting. I think you don't need to be multiple posts a day. Like I think in the past we had seen that, but the algorithm really is going to showcase and surface the content that's ideally most relevant for those folks. So you want to make it quality over quantity, but you can spread content out a little bit and kind of tease it along and tie them together.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that actually touched on Nathan's question, which I think a lot of my listeners, a lot of my followers are this one person comms team, or even comms is a piece of their job. They might be a development director and comms is one piece of their job. I think for this question, my advice would be focus, like less is more, focus on fewer channels, because the reality is creating the content, managing the community and the comments, the measurement and analysis, research, staying on top of the trends, what's working, what's not on this particular platform, all of that takes time, and you can't really miss a piece of that. Like you have to be doing, not just pushing out content, you really have to be invested and engaged. And it might not be possible to do that on 5 platforms. It really might be best to focus on 1 or 2 that you can do really well. I don't know if you want to add to that, Laura.
Well, I fully agree. And I think that maybe leads into kind of our advice on platforms from the trends for this year.
Yes, let's do it. And that's Catherine's question too.
Which platforms? We're really seeing that there is a need, like you said, for organizations to cut back and focus on their champion platform. So when you can take the time to do those audits and realize what's performing well for you, we're very much encouraging organizations to not be scared to let go of, maybe even leave altogether, platforms that aren't performing as well. What we see from our data is that nonprofit organizations are most confident that Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram are delivering positive ROI for their organizations. There's a bit of a unique pocket of WhatsApp users as well. Only 7% of our respondents are actually using WhatsApp, but of that 7%, they're really confident in their returns. So could be something worth exploring, but is a little bit more niche, obviously, in its use. But what we really see is that people are sometimes nervous that they'll lose an audience if they leave a platform, or they feel like they have to have a presence on, all the prominent platforms. And it's just not true anymore. The average social media user is logging into about 7 platforms every month. And so they will see your content somewhere. It's likely if they were following you on Twitter or X, and that's no longer the best platform for you. I'm not saying that's true for every organization, but if that's the case, they're likely following you on Instagram as well. So we just really think organizations, to save yourself the time and to be able to create that quality content and have time to run those audits, you don't need to be everywhere anymore.
And just to kind of, one of the questions we see. Yeah, it's nonprofits often ask, okay, if I am thinking about leaving a platform, what's the best practice? And so, definitely don't delete your account, hang on to that handle, and kind of transition out of it. Make a small campaign where you do a few posts leading up to it, letting people know where to find you for most active content. Update the banner images and your bios to let people know what are the other networks that you're going to focus on. And you can give that kind of nice look. It's not like you've just ghosted for, your audience there, your community. You've invited them to kind of find you elsewhere, or, say like, if you want more of this type of update, come over here. That's a nice way to kind of transition out of it and then not lose the handle. You don't want anyone grabbing it and impersonating your nonprofit. So really important not to like delete your accounts, but just let people know where to find you.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great piece of advice. I know when I left Twitter, when it was still Twitter before it was X, when Elon Musk bought it, it was really a sad moment for me. I had 18,000 followers. Like, I'd really built up a community there. I'd met a lot of my friends and consultants and colleagues on the platform. And I did exactly what you said. I didn't delete it. I just said, I've decided to focus on LinkedIn. I've decided to focus on my podcast, these other platforms. Here's ways to reach me. And I sort of phased it out. And then in my bio, I have that information as well. And I also think another important point is when you are choosing to invest your time and resources in a platform, you also have to, as a nonprofit, make sure that I know why I should follow you there. Like, what are you sharing on Instagram? Are you sharing fun stories and reels or behind the scenes information, or are you sharing, stories on your staff, your interns, your volunteers? And then maybe on LinkedIn, you're sharing more professional research. You're sharing more industry insights. And then on Facebook, maybe you're sharing more events or live video or something. So let people know, if you are on multiple platforms, why they really should be following you specifically. And not everyone's going to follow you on all of your platforms. I usually pick one or two. I mean, I'm thinking of the nonprofits I follow. I usually follow them either on Instagram or Facebook. I don't think I would follow them on both unless I was very invested, just depending on what I like to use, what I like to see, and what they're sharing. Are you finding that in the also, I wanted to talk on one other platform specific point that I thought was really interesting from this report, was that your research found out that LinkedIn was higher engagement than Facebook. Am I getting that right, Laura?
Opposite, actually.
For
We see
nonprofits,
Facebook. Yeah, we see Facebook being used at higher rates than other industries are using it. LinkedIn is also very high. So Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook are all, I would say, very close in usage for nonprofits. But Facebook's a little bit of the outlier, where we're seeing nonprofits still lean in and see results there more than other industries are. But on the LinkedIn point, like you said, I think it's very important to know who your audience is there and specifically how to use it, because you might run very different campaigns on LinkedIn, or that might be where you reach out to potential corporate donors, or share research, like you said, that your nonprofit is doing.
Another point in the report that I do really want to talk about is generative AI, artificial intelligence, just because it's such a hot topic and it's just such a polarizing topic. It's controversial. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are scared. Some people are excited. I'm kind of a combination of all of them. But I find with this huge tool, with the huge power and potential on the rise, nonprofits really have to navigate the balance between efficiency and authenticity. And I think that is so key. And so what are some ways that either you're seeing or some ideas that you might have to effectively incorporate these AI tools into social media strategies without compromising authenticity?
We are seeing, I think, that feeling that you have of it being a little bit scary, a little bit exciting is what everyone is feeling. And I don't think anyone has a perfect answer for it yet. We are seeing a little bit of friction right now between how readily audiences are embracing AI and how eager marketers are to use it. We don't want people to shy away from it because of that, but it is important to know a little bit about who your audience is. Specifically, there's a bit of a generational difference of how trusting people are of AI. So you might want to be aware of that. If you have a Gen Z or millennial audience, they might be a little bit more trusting. But in saying that, to answer your question a bit more directly, Julia, we think, to find that balance between the human touch to really maintain those trusting relationships with your audience, and then finding efficiency through the bots, We would suggest the human touch is really important for things like creating your content strategy for social, editing and refining your captions before they go out, ensuring your images and your posts are up to your brand standards, interacting in the comment section with your supporters, and then also doing that final monitoring for brand safety and compliance risks. But then you might want to utilize AI for things like brainstorming ideas, doing that first pass at your content suggestions or your captions. Like, for example, the Hootsuite platform has Owly Writer, which will suggest a caption for you, and then we suggest that you take your human lens and make sure that that works for you before you just send it out into the universe.
Right. Yeah, the trust part's really interesting, isn't it? Like, it's
trust is huge.
The nonprofits that we've spoken to about this particular trend feel quite strongly about not using AI generated images, for example, and being really transparent with your audience about where you're going to use AI so that it's not a surprise. They don't feel deceived. And, I think there's a real potential for AI kind of generated content to potentially impact that trust that you have with your audience. So being really cautious about that, having an internal policy is key. But then, leverage it where it makes sense. Use the data to help you find the best times to post, recommend topics and content based on your past performing content. That's all very helpful for saving time. And you don't need to spend hours doing that type of work, but you can then tweak it and be so much more efficient.
Yep. And I know that our friends at Neon One CRM, they've released an email marketing report. And a lot of the analysis was done with ChatGPT. So they did an email subject line analysis around the most highest performing words in a subject line. And what's the best day to send? They did a sentiment analysis on the subject lines. Like, do subject lines that use positive words work better than maybe negative words? I mean, there's so many ways we can use ChatGPT other than just like creating content from scratch. Another way I like to use it with my clients, if you upload your annual report or some data from your annual report and you just say, create 5 LinkedIn posts, and then you can tweak them. You can look at them and say, oh, this is really interesting. This is a point I wasn't thinking of. The way I like to think of is, I use ChatGPT. I know there's a million generative AI tools out there. It's just the intern that I don't have. It's like the assistant I don't have. Like, here, look at this. Generate a list of bullet points from this report or this news article, do some research for me on this. What are some ideas that you have? How could I tweak this to make it maybe 500 words instead of 1,500 words? It really is. You should look at it more as like that assistant, and that that it's saving you time. It's not taking your job. It's really just saving you time. And we all know that time is money. So I think those are some really, really great points there. So Catherine's question, I like, because I think it's a bigger question. So she's a very specific question around, and for our podcast listeners, I want to read it. Our grassroots nonprofit has been really struggling with social media. Will you be talking about the use of LinkedIn? And then this question, do you have advice about a good place to offer support to parents who are cutting back on paid work to spend time with their infants? So what I want to do is, rather than maybe answer that specific question, I would probably say Pinterest, because that's a great place for parents. And I know Instagram is a great place, but I would, where can you find your audience? Like, what are some tools and tactics and strategies that nonprofits can use to find their specific audience? Like Catherine has a very specific audience.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, the audience research piece is so important to getting things right. And I would say, don't be afraid of just having some one-to-one conversations. I think we find we get the most value out of having a personal conversation with someone, let's say at a nonprofit, because we want to understand what the challenges are. And if we're looking to reach a type of audience, all you really need is like 1 or 2 folks who can help point you towards the communities that they're really engaged in. And then from there, you can kind of keep snowballing. So it's I wouldn't say, like, obviously you could Google certain communities, and maybe Reddit might have a really good community, and you could, create a profile and then post in there and ask folks. But I think people are really open to, if you ask a question, if you post like in a LinkedIn community group, which is a great use of LinkedIn, or if you post in a Facebook group and or find someone who is a member of the community you're trying to reach. That's a really nice way to do it, where it's authentic. You're kind of reaching out saying, I'd like to, I can offer value for this group. This is what I want to do and who I want to reach. And can you recommend where I can start? And it will kind of grow from there. And then the more time you spend in those communities, you'll see other paths as well.
Oh, absolutely. Laura, do you have any other tactics you've seen to do audience research?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. I think we also always encourage to make sure you are reaching the right audience, to run like demographic analysis as part of when you're doing audits of your different platforms. Just double checking, are the people that are interacting with your posts the donors or the volunteers that you are looking to reach, and just confirming those things through the abundance of data that you can get from each of the platforms once you think you have found that right audience. It's a good confirmation.
And definitely don't write out collaborations too. Let's say there's another nonprofit that is working in that space. One of the questions we often get is, how do I reach a new type of audience? Or if I know who I want to target and I don't know how to get there, finding another nonprofit who's complementary to you and working together on a campaign benefits both groups, because you can, or it doesn't have to be another nonprofit, it could be a brand or a product, but partnering on an initiative. And this is kind of what I found a lot in my early career, was I would bring in nonprofits that were relevant for my campaigns to add a bit more purpose and meaning to it and awareness. And it's a nice way to reach their audience, that they get to reach your audience. There's mutual collaboration on content, so it's lightening the load on both sides ideally. And you can typically use that to kind of reach new audiences as well.
I would see who already has your audience and go to them. So who are the bloggers? Who are the Instagram influencers? Who's on TikTok using the hashtags that your audience uses? And try to create partnerships with them, or just see what they do. See the kind of content that they create that's really resonating with this audience. What we tend to do is create the content we want to create and then get mad when our audience is not attracted to it. But we haven't done the research to really figure out what our audience wants and what they're attracted to. So I'm going to kind of skip around here, because there's a lot of questions, but this was one that I wanted to ask from the report. Are you seeing anything around the type of content? I know you talked about entertainment that's performing best in the NPO space. So Danielle was saying UGC, which is user generated content, versus infographics, etc.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I don't think we're seeing video go anywhere anytime soon. Short video is definitely still performing very well for organizations. Can be time consuming. We understand that. So we recommend, using different tools available that might help with those things, or thinking about how can you turn some of your images into reels? How can you do behind the scenes at your organization? You don't need these like perfectly curated professional videos in order for them to perform well on social. When it comes to things like user-generated content, that's always going to be really helpful for what your audience is finding valuable. And so when we talk about entertainment, it's really about talking about what engages your audience. So if you can get the people who support you to be talking about why they're emotionally invested in you, and they're the ones that are kind of selling your mission instead of you, that's always going to resonate really, really well, no matter what space you're in. Yep. Ava, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we've seen for a few years now that your content doesn't have to be perfectly polished. I think people appreciate transparency into what's happening behind the scenes and the people that you're serving. And that's a tricky one. Obviously, you can't always highlight directly the clients that you have as a nonprofit, but quick behind the scene kind of films, that type of imperfect content actually does kind of tug a little bit at the emotions that someone might have looking at it, and they're not expecting a nonprofit to do extremely beautiful finished marketing campaigns. If anything, it kind of, you want to make sure that people are thinking, okay, they're not spending a huge amount of budget on really perfect videos, for example, but ideally the content that you're building here, you could create a piece of content and then turn it into a few different styles of content to test and learn which one works best on which channel. So if you had 7 services that your nonprofit provides, turn it into an infographic about those that you served. You could break those into individual little story pieces. But testing and learning is quite important for this question, because you will find that different kinds of content perform better in different networks. They're kind of built differently. Like Instagram does well visually for videos, like TikTok, and maybe LinkedIn is better at more article-based content. Like it does take a little bit of playing around. But to your point, Julia, like looking at what others that inspire you are doing is a great way to kind of think, oh, I'm going to start there. Like this seems to be working well for them. It doesn't have to be the same industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that gets to this question. And Cassie, I see your question, but I think Bridie's question relates really to what you were just talking about, Ava. Would you recommend cross-posting the same things across 1 or 2 platforms, keeping them all differentiated? And I mean, for me, you could repurpose and recycle content. If you have a fantastic research report, like I'm working with the Boston Foundation and they do a workforce report. So they would post probably the PDF or even the link on LinkedIn. Then on Instagram, they wouldn't do that because it's harder to post a link in a post. They would probably do a short video or maybe an infographic or a graphic. So I think taking into account the strengths of the platform, and certainly can be the same content, but you need to zhuzh it, if you will.
Yeah, I think playing to strengths is a great way to put it.
Yeah, anything playing to strengths.
Yeah, it's
like what works, and that's the challenge. Is like you can't repurpose a research report for TikTok. You can't post a PDF on TikTok. Like you have to create content that works on TikTok. You have to create content that works on Instagram. They are different countries. It's sort of like, I always say this in my social media for Social Good Academy. If you buy a guidebook for France, it's not going to work for Germany. Like, even though they're right next to each other, and they're very small and they're all in Europe. I mean, it's not the same. They're not the same. So you certainly can travel to all of these countries, but the strengths, best practices, etiquette, language, behaviors, all of these platforms, they're so different. So cross-posting, yes, but you have to mold it into what it needs to be. Okay, I want to get to, let's see, I don't know if we'll be able to get to all these questions, but Cassie's question about balancing campaigns to your audience versus campaigns to, I guess, a not warm audience. I don't know. What would you say?
I'm just rereading the question here.
So how do you recommend balancing ad campaigns to your audience?
Maybe how to balance ad campaigns versus organic posting for donation asks.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing about, paid social, and we get a lot of questions about, when should it be organic and when should I use paid? And, what is really effective about paid is lookalike audiences. Like if you want to target those that look most like your top 1% or 2-3% of your audience that's engaged and donating, there are some pretty powerful advertising tools that can help you reach the people who are most like your, let's say, warm audience or those who are already contributing. So ad campaigns are phenomenally helpful for reaching new similar audiences to help you grow, or reaching a new demographic that you want, that you haven't gotten in front of. So, it obviously comes down to budget and having a really clear call to action as well. So, organic posting for donation asks, you're going to reach the current audience you have, and that may not actually be the audience you want to reach for a donation ask. People may be following you for different reasons. So it can be challenging. You've kind of spent time building an audience. You might need to reach a different kind of person for a fundraising ask. And that's where paid can be really helpful.
Yes, I agree. And I see ads. I think the best fundraising ads are very time specific and very donation ask specific. So I've seen a lot right now that's, donate to support a family for the holidays, or $5 will feed a family for Thanksgiving, whatever it might be. So if it's timely and relevant and urgent, like why this, why now, reaching a complete stranger in that way could be effective. But yeah, I do think targeting a warm audience first, people that know you, know a little bit about you, might be more effective. This question from Marty gets into a question that I had around the report, the findings of the report, which, I mean, the report really found that entertainment is going to take, center stage, right? So the report suggests that nonprofits should turn to entertainment. And I think that's where nonprofits struggle. I know that's where nonprofits struggle. So Marty asks, is it okay to post very unrelated posts for fun, like today is National Cat Herding Day, and we support people with disabilities? What are your thoughts? What were the findings from the report?
When we look at the data from the report and we talk about entertaining, I think it's just important to keep in mind that entertaining doesn't have to mean fun, humorous, lighthearted. That's kind of what we go to first, is that type of content on social. But when it's entertaining, entertainment definition really just means enjoyment, and enjoyment can mean a lot of different things. It's basically, what is your audience coming to your organization for specifically on social to find value from? So my reaction to this would be to really lean more into things that are relevant to your organization. So if, for example, Plan International Canada supports women and girls, and when Barbie was really massive this year, that was a great way they could take a very popular trending thing that people were already gravitating towards and make a direct brand tie to what they actually do. So I would say if there's, fun days like this or fun trends or calendar moments, and you can make a tie to your organization, that's a really good way to hop on. But if there's trends that are out there that are a bit of a stretch, it's okay to leave those ones and not try to jump on every single fun day or fun trend. I don't know, Ava, what are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like if you, for example, with this particular example of, I've not heard of National Cat Herding Day, but I love it. If there was maybe a natural story
Every
that
day
you come across
cat herding
from
day.
somebody, right? Like if a natural thing happened and you were like, oh, that's great, and we've got permission to share it, and we're going to capture this, like maybe it's a video or a moment or something, and you can tie it to a moment, then great. Like it does have to feel kind of natural and not forced if it's not directly related, but maybe there's an opportunity to feature how animals are helping those who have disabilities in recovery, for example. You could potentially find ties to Laura's point, but it would be more beneficial to plan for the national days that have a more relatable tie-in so that you can capitalize on those discussions. Yeah.
Yep. And I love Wayne's comment. He used Bard, which is generative AI, and asked your question, Marty, and got a lot of different answers. You can see that in the comments. But that is a fantastic use of AI, is to type these questions in and just kind of see what happens. You might get some good responses. Okay, we've just 2 more questions. I know we're like at time. The best way to research your audience, we talked a little bit more about this. What do you think about surveys specifically? I like a survey, especially if someone signs up for an email newsletter. If you ask them that they're most engaged at that point, or maybe polls on social media. But do you have any other ways that you've seen that work?
Surveys are great. I'm glad you brought up, Julia. We always encourage to use the actual poll and Q&A functions on social, because you should ask questions to your audience about what content they are appreciating, seeing, if it's hitting the mark or not. So don't be afraid to, like we've been saying, like go back to the interaction routes on social instead of the transactional routes. And that's one way that you can really make it feel like a two-way conversation, is just ask what's valuable to you.
Yeah, the other way is to kind of take a look at, let's say you found a community of audience members that you want to attract, or they're in another group that they're active in. Just externally looking at engagement is a really valuable tactic for understanding what they want, how they're consuming content, what resonates, and the comments they're leaving. So, we recommend looking at brands that you admire and other networks, other industries, get inspiration from everywhere, and then bring that back to your channel and your community.
Perfect. Okay. One last question, then I want to leave us with some trends and some thoughts for the new year. But animation on graphics, does using animation on graphics converting it from a JPEG or PNG to MP4 help posts perform as well as video content, in your opinion, or do you think it's platform and channel specific? I think it helps post perform if you can stop the scroll, but I do think it depends on the platform.
I agree. I think platform will play a bit of a role here. Like, I do think Instagram is probably prioritizing more motion than static content because they've been, really trying to make reels happen. And, some platforms are obviously very like video first. So in those cases, it's actually helpful sometimes to follow the folks who are from the company. So Adam Mosseri is a great example of, on Instagram, follow him, and he will kind of give you these insights along the way to help guide you on how they're thinking about the platform, where they're investing their time. And those investments they're making as a company is going to indicate what format of content is actually going to be prioritized probably in the future. So he's kind of alluded to the fact that, videos and things are typically seeing more folks eyeballs on that platform. So good question.
I love that. That's such a great idea. Follow the people that work on the platform, or follow the people that are really successful or that actually creating these features. And it's the challenge here is that it changes constantly. Like, we will hopefully do this next year, and potentially there might be a new platform. I mean, like, if it's something like Threads, you can't put photos and videos. So, it's very text-based. So it does on the platform. All right. My last question, while I still have you. So the report, I am going to put the link again in the comments, suggests that 2024 may be social media's most pivotal year. So what developments or changes do you foresee shaping the social media landscape for nonprofits, and how can organizations prepare for what lies ahead?
Yeah, such a huge question. There's so much going on in the social media world. What we see from the report research is that strategic nonprofits for 2024 are really ready to get more focused on what's working well for their organization, instead of trying to maintain presence across all the platforms and, stay on the bandwagon just because it's what everyone else is doing. And we also know that the strategic organizations will take their social content strategies back to their roots, which is really focusing on interaction with their audience versus transaction. We've seen social until this point grow so much in sophistication and how organizations can use it. But a side result of that is that it's also become very transactional. So we just think there's a really huge opportunity for organizations this year to play that long game on social, remember that fundraising is one content pillar, and focus on relationship building.
Yeah, the long-term game, I think it's really hard to balance the short-term asks from leadership and pressures that marketers may be facing within nonprofit organizations. But if we look at that bigger picture beyond even social, what is kind of concerning is that, we're seeing a bit of a downward trend in giving across the globe, as with recent Giving Tuesdays as an example. But the demand for the services that nonprofits are providing is only growing, and the cost of providing those services is growing. So you've got this inherent battle between increasing demand, increasing cost, but not necessarily as much funds coming in to help with that growing demand. So getting it right on social is going to be really critical for not only finding those people who need your services and raising awareness, but also getting help and getting those folks who follow you to support you financially is going to be so essential. So taking the time now to refine your social strategy to what works and the platforms that are most impactful, and having a really clear tracking structure. And we do have a lot of templates and reports available too that we can share on the comments here for this specifically, so that you're not creating them from scratch. But with all the work that's on everyone's plates, typically being a one-person communication team or multiple responsibilities, ensuring that you're not wasting your time on social and that you're doing the things that are going to yield long-term results is just so essential at this point for everyone that's relying on the nonprofits and supporting the nonprofits. So that's kind of why we feel so passionately about this report and these trends.
Yes, let's do our work more efficiently, more authentically, more effectively, because it's really really important work. So I love that. On that note, thank you so much, Laura and Ava, for being here and for sharing all of these fantastic insights with my audience. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. All of the links, if you want to connect with Laura and Ava, I put their LinkedIn profiles. They'll be in the nonprofit show notes, and they're going to be in the comments. And a link to download the report is there as well. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. I really want to thank you both for just being so generous with your time and for being so generous with doing this kind of important research. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
See
Thanks
you
for all the
later.
great
Bye.